Arcane Season 1 was a solid show. It featured compelling characters, a decent narrative, an interesting world, and themes pertaining to sisterhood and class conflict. Arcane Season 2, on the other hand, does not succeed in following on the strengths of Season 1. Now, don't get me wrong, Season 2 still has a lot of good things that Season 1 did, like beautiful animation, fun action scenes, and good music, albeit a little overused compared to Season 1. But when it comes to the actual story, Season 2 is kind of terrible. The narrative is a mess, the characters are completely whack, and where Season 1 had something compelling to say about its themes, Season 2 chooses spectacle over substance in what can only be described as a complete thematic betrayal. It's very easy to say that Arcane Season 2 was a rush job and that the creators needed more episodes, but I don't believe that would have fixed anything. It wouldn't have fixed the questionable politics and messages baked into the story, the hackneyed characterization of all the characters, or the rather juvenile way the series ended. You would frankly need a whole rewrite of Season 2 from the ground up to fix this. So, that's what this video is about. This is Pearl. Viewers of my skits on YouTube Shorts would know her as my sister. She and I decided to try and rewrite the entirety of Season 2 in an attempt to remain consistent with the themes set by Season 1, primarily the themes of class conflict and the conflict between Piltover and Zon. So our rewritten Season 2 begins with the council bombing, just like the original, and for our first change, only Mel, Jace, and Victor survive, with Victor being nearly on his deathbed and getting saved with a hex core like in the original show. All the other counselors, though, they're dead, leaving Mel and Jace as the only counselors left. We then cut to Cassandra Kiraman's funeral, which Kate and Vi will attend. Caitlin is grieving with her dad, and Vi refuses to take up the Enforcer badge that she offers later. I don't have any changes to this scene. It's a great scene as it showcases their characters and their current relationship, and also hints at the direction of Vi's character arc of becoming an Enforcer, which we will further explore later in this rewrite. So with all the counselors dead, does that mean Ambessa will move to take control of Piltover? No. Instead, the one to fill the power vacuum will be a new character. To Arcane fans at least. Enter Camille Pharos, Intelligencer of Clan Pharos, here to represent the interests of the noble houses of Piltover. See, one of the big issues I had with Arcane Season 2 was the sidelining of the class conflict between Piltover and Zon, and the biggest contributing factor to that was making Ambessa try to take over the city. By introducing Camille, we will be continuing with the class conflict between Piltover and Zon instead of sidelining it for a save-the-world team-up that puts the burden of reconciliation on the shoulders of the oppressed. How does Camille contribute to this? As League players will know, Camille is the Intelligencer of Clan Pharos, which is basically a fancy way of saying she maintains the hierarchical order of Piltover and Zon, mostly by killing Zonites that get too uppity and try to rise above their station. In our rewrite, Camille will be the voice that advocates for pushing the boot further on Zon, while Ambessa will primarily back Camille's perspective while trying to comfort Mel and further ingratiate herself with Jace. These new character dynamics will serve two purposes. One, it makes it so that Piltover is solely responsible for the escalation of Piltover's violence against Zon, rather than being manipulated by the big bad evil Noxian lady. And two, it allows us to shift Ambessa's role in the story into a more interesting position that is more true to her character in Season 1. See, in Season 1, Ambessa arrived in Piltover primarily to secure Hextech weaponry. She showed no interest in Piltover as a city, whereas in Season 2 she ends up wanting to conquer the city for herself because we needed a villain to unite the oppressors and oppressed together, I guess. Instead of doing that, this rewrite will have Ambessa be focused on subtly pitting the two cities against each other so that she can get the Hextech weapons before leaving. If we wanted to get into how this works thematically, think of Ambessa as an imperialist superpower that enters another country, plums it for its resources, and then leaves after making it worse off. Considering what Noctis is like, I think this is a far more interesting characterization over what we got. Mel and Jace will then hold a memorial for the dead council, which the Chem Barons will attack. However, instead of Ambessa secretly tipping off the Chem Barons to have them attack, we will have them do this on their own volition. Vi and Caitlin will save each other in the fight, Ambessa will save Jace and Mel, and for our final addition to this scene, Caitlin's dad will get kidnapped. For anyone who knows League lore, you can probably see where I'm going with this. In the aftermath, Jace can thank Ambessa for saving him, and Ambessa can imply he can repay her by offering to make her Hextech weapons. Jace will refuse, obviously, stating that he and Victor swore not to use Hextech for weapons, and Ambessa will back off. Because of this attack and the bombing, Camille will advocate for sending enforcers into Zon to try and find the ones responsible for the attack, and Ambessa will back her up, saying something like retaliation is necessary, wrath must be met with wrath, and all of that stuff. This serves as a good showcase of what Camille and Ambessa's dynamic in the rewrite is going to be. Both will advocate for violence against the Zonites, each for their own benefits. Camille to preserve Piltover's position above Zon, and Ambessa to sow war so she can get her weapons. A thematic dance between imperialism and the wealthy. With the enforcers gearing up to go into Zon, Caitlin will discover that the Kiramans designed a ventilation system that allows the Undercity to get rid of the Grey, and joins up with the enforcers that will be going into Zon as a squad leader. While she will contribute to the crackdown on Zon, Kate's actual purpose into going down there will be to find her dad, and Vi will join her, not as an enforcer though, just as a consultant. Vi's decision to becoming an enforcer is going to be her primary arc throughout this rewrite, and I want the moment she chooses to become a cop to be a much more pivotal moment than it was in the actual show. For our last scene, scene, we'll cut to a derelict temple to Janna in Zaun, where Caitlyn's dad is tied up and gagged. In the shadows, a woman is standing. She steps out and we finally see who kidnapped Caitlyn's father, a woman named Corina Veraza, and the episode ends. So who is Corina Veraza and what is her deal? Well, in lore, Caitlyn's deal was that her parents were kidnapped by a criminal mastermind known as C, and Caitlyn's dedicated her entire career to hunting down this C. Kind of a whole Sherlock and Moriarty kind of deal. That doesn't happen in Arcane due to one of her parents being dead, but I decided to implement it into this rewrite, because I intend to utilize Corina while setting up the seeds for Caitlyn to becoming her lore self. So, episode 2 begins with Jinx mourning Silco like she did in the actual show. We'll start by showing her in his office, gathering things to mourn him, and as she leaves, she notices Savika's arm on the desk. Jinx is going to be in a dark place, and unlike in the actual Season 2, we aren't going to have Isha. Isha is mostly a character that exists so that the story doesn't have to deal with the consequences of Jinx's mental illness or actions in Season 1. It felt like the writers didn't know what to do with Jinx, and so they created Isha as a way to keep her occupied for 2 acts, and then when they needed to get her back to the position where she was at the end of Season 1, they just killed Isha off to replay that character arc beat by beat. Only it was in a much more hackneyed version with tragic flashbacks and sad music playing over everything. Isha never really gets the chance to be anything more than a plot device and an accessory to Jinx, so she's getting cut from this rewrite, and we're keeping Jinx at her worst. We then show how Zaun's been doing in the aftermath of Jinx's bombing of the council and the most recent attack, and it's not doing well. The Chem Barons are fighting over the power vacuum left by Silco, and Savika is barely keeping things together. Smeech can offer to hand Jinx over, to which Savika refuses. As for the rest of Zaun, enforcers are pouring in, claiming to look for Jinx and applying aggressive negotiation tactics on the Zaunites, which is to say police brutality. As Jinx wanders around the city in grief, she catches sight of Vi and Caitlyn among enforcers and decides to tail them, trying to determine if Vi has truly joined the enforcers, which is unclear because Vi has yet to don the uniform. Back in Piltover, Victor finally wakes up and hears from Jason Mel about enforcers being sent to Zaun as well as them gassing the Zaunites. Disgusted, Victor will leave to Jace's dismay in a similar manner to how he left in the original show, just with a slightly different motivation now. However, this time, he will take a few things from the lab with him, namely the Hex Claw and 3 Hextech gemstones. In Zaun, Savika finds Jinx tailing the enforcer and tries to get her help to rally Zaun. We can have the fight between Savika and Smeech here if you want and have Jinx give Savika her new arm. The main purpose of this scene will be to further showcase Jinx's priorities versus Savika's priorities. In Season 1, Savika's role in the story was the kingmaker of Zaun. She was loyal not to an individual, but to an ideal, a Zaun free from Piltover's shackles. It's why she betrayed Vander and why she didn't betray Silco for Finn. So in this rewrite, Savika will be trying to find another individual whom she can help rally the Zaunites against Piltover. Jinx, however, does not have a free Zaun on her priority list. Throughout Season 1, Jinx was never shown really invested in the politics of Zaun, and only really did things for Silco's approval, like a kid trying to help their parent with something. She still hates Piltover, but it's more personal for her than political, and we will continue that trend through this rewrite, with Jinx being disinterested in being Savika's symbol. So, Savika leaves and Jinx continues tailing Kate and Vi. As for Kate and Vi, them being in the Undercity with all the enforcers will be a good time for their relationship to start hitting speed bumps. Caitlyn can start having a growing disdain for Zaun, and Vi can be torn between the enforcers brutalizing her people and believing order will help prevent more bloodshed. This is probably going to be the hardest thing to sell Vi on, as fan perception of Vi has always been as the good guy Zaunite. But considering that her character arc in the original Season 2 was become a cop, serve cunt, cry, and fuck Caitlyn, I think it's more interesting. Besides, Season 1 did showcase how the Undercity became unfamiliar to Vi, which also is a nice parallel to how Jinx became unfamiliar to her as well. By focusing on the aspects in Season 1 where she doesn't really gel with Zaun that much anymore, we not only get some interesting internal conflicts to explore, but it also sets us on the road for Vi's character arc into becoming more aligned with her lore self. The rest of the episode concludes in a fairly similar way as it did in the actual show. Ambessa gets attacked by the Black Rose, and Sinch does his experiments on Warwick. Episode 3 begins with Victor wandering through the gassed out Undercity. Unfortunately, the gases still have negative effects on his body, and Victor will begin the slow transition of replacing parts of himself with mechanical augments. This will be a slow process that happens over time, but he will eventually become the Machine Herald. And I mean the actual Machine Herald, not Walmart Zalani. So, Victor is in the Undercity when he comes across a woman with white hair, asking him for help. Her limbs have atrophied, her eyes are gone, and the fact that she's breathing is nothing short of a miracle. Victor will be conflicted. He just accidentally killed Skye a while back. We can even insert a little flashback of Skye here to band-aid the fridging decision of the Season 1 writers a bit. That death is still on his conscience, and now there's a person asking for him to help her who is probably going to die no matter what he does. Victor tells her Victor that while he might be able to save her, and that's a big might, he states that she won't necessarily be the same afterwards. She doesn't care though, she just wants to live. So Victor gets to work on saving this woman. He'll first use one of his Hextech gems to build a stasis device that can keep her alive. Yes, this is important and will come up later. With the woman in stasis, Victor will then amputate all her limbs, replacing them with mechanical ones, give her a new set of mechanical eyes, and build a workaround for her lungs. When the woman wakes up, she will be a mimicry of her former self. Flesh replaced with mechanics. Grateful for saving her life, she pledges loyalty to Victor, who will be somewhat dismissive of this, telling her that if anyone needs help, to send them his way. He then finds the remains of a steam golem and starts contemplating about his next venture in helping Zahn. So if you hadn't figured it out, this woman is in fact a character from Legends of Runeterra, Riot's card game that was one of the main drivers of Runeterra's lore and world building before Riot decided to shoot it dead and spit on its corpse. She is the mechanized mimic, one of Victor's more devout followers, and Riot has dropped an implication of her having a deeper story with Victor, which we'll probably never see, so I decided to make use of her here. For Victor, I think him saving the mimic could be a juxtaposition to him accidentally killing Skye, with Skye's death pushing Victor to try and save as many Zonites as possible no matter the cost. Maybe the mimic could remind Victor of Skye. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think Skye's death was a very questionable writing decision, as she mostly existed to be shoved into the proverbial refrigerator, and if I were to rewrite Arcane Season 1, I wouldn't include her. But we're working on what was established in Season 1, so we gotta make do with what we have. We then return to Piltover, where the political scene is starting to turn for the worst. Ambessa and Camille will approach Jace again and ask him about the possibility of Hextech weaponry, since now that Victor's gone, any decisions about Hextech are now in Jace's hands, and Camille really wants to put more boot on Zahn's neck. Jace will again offer another rationalization for why he can't make Hextech weapons, citing that there are not enough crystals to create a feasible amount of weapons. Camille can then offer a solution for this problem. By combining Ambessa and Noxian's knowledge of runes, as well as alchemists that Clan Pharaohs can supply, she believes that they can create a synthetic substitute for Hextech. With this, Camille can then go and start setting things up for the factories to start producing synthetic Hextech crystals. So, this scene accomplishes a few things. First, it continues to reinforce the idea of Camille and Ambessa playing off each other for one another's benefit. Two, it showcases the slow erosion of Jace's morals as he is caught in Piltover's continued desire to use systemic violence. I intend for Jace to offer a rationalization for each time the question of Hextech weaponry gets brought up, each more flimsier than the last, until he finally caves. And for the last thing, this allows us to establish Clan Pharaohs' whole deal. In lore, Clan Pharaohs is the one responsible for bringing Hextech to Piltover. Obviously, that doesn't happen in Arcane, but once the scarcity of Hextech becomes more apparent, the clan starts using runic alchemy to create synthetic Hextech crystals, so it's only fitting we could put that in here. So, Jace and Mel discuss their current predicament. Jace wants to go find Victor, which Mel discourages, because with the council bombing and the worsening situation between Piltover and Zahn, things are starting to become more and more dangerous. This brings up a question Jace has had since the bombing, which is how he and Mel survived the blast unscathed when everyone else died and Victor was put 2/3 into the wolf's jaw. Mel states that she doesn't know, which will foreshadow her magical abilities. As for the topic of what to do in regards to Camille, Jace will be relatively apathetic to Camille's motives and focus on getting Victor back, which perfectly showcases Jace's position in Piltover slowly becoming like Heimerdinger's, an ivory tower scholar who's completely oblivious to the societal upheaval around him. As for Mel, she will stand against Camille, wanting to fix the division of the two cities where she has made her home. Back in Zahn, Vi and Caitlyn find the temple where Caitlyn's dad is being kept and fight off the thugs there, with Kate seeing shadows around her. However, before they can free Kate's dad, Jinx will ambush them. Jinx reveals to them that she was tracking them. She's here to finish Vi off, expressing anger at Vi for throwing her lot in with the people oppressing them. A fight breaks out between Jinx, Kate, and Vi and their Enforcer squad, though Jinx will have the advantage, not just for being shimmered up, but also from using Kate's dad as a human shield. The fight will end in a similar way it did in the original Episode 3 ending, with Jinx setting off the gas bombs that send the Grey back to Piltover and escaping, while Kate and Vi rescue Kate's dad. Back in Piltover, we'll not only see the fallout from Jinx's gas explosion, but also see Mel get kidnapped by the Black Rose, only this time Ambessa will be there to see Mel get taken. In Zahn, as Jinx escapes the battle, she gets cornered by Corina Veraza. Corina reveals that she was the one who kidnapped Caitlyn's dad and demands that Jinx take her to see Savika. She's aware that Savika's been trying to scrape up a force to fight Piltover, and Corina wants in. When Jinx asks what Corina can even do, Corina reveals that she managed to acquire from Caitlyn's dad a way to fight back against the Piltover Enforcers, revealing in her hand a single flower. And the episode ends there. Act 2, Episode 4. We open on the conflict between the two cities escalating further. Riots are being assembled in Zahn against the increasing Enforcer presence, and this will be around the time Singe seeks Warwick into the world, which will only make the situation worse. Enforcers were already getting scrapped up a bit before, but now they are straight up disappearing, and Camille can notice this. Camille will be undeniably pissed about this whole situation. The council bombing, the ceremony attack, Zahn's refusal to roll over and accept the boot, and now Jinx's latest attack and Enforcers getting vanished? This can no longer stand, and with Jace preparing to search for Victor and Mel gone, there is no one left to hold Camille back. She will start pushing through reforms to accelerate the speed of the Enforcer training program, along with a recruitment campaign and an arrest quota for all Enforcers with a bonus payment for each extra arrest. See, she's not explicitly hurting the Zonites. All the Zonites getting brutalized and thrown into Stillwater by Enforcers looking for an extra buck? That's just a coincidence. Along with this, Camille and Ambessa, who is torn between going to look for Mel and staying in Piltover to try and get her weapons, will go and try to convince Jace, again, to make Hextech weapons. Jace can be overseeing the production of synthetic Hextech crystals at one of Camille's factories as he prepares to set off and find Victor. Jace, of course, offers another rationalization, this time stating that even if they make the weapons, they don't have a decent place to actually test them, to which Camille points out that they have the perfect firing range, right across the river. Down in Zon, Victor's reputation as a healer continues to spread. He's noted the Mimic and the other people he's helped thriving in Zon, and this starts to fuel his beliefs in transhumanism, as well as his process of replacing more and more of himself with machinery. Now, he's testing out his newest creation to help the people of Zon. Using the defunct golem he found in Act 1, Victor implants his second Hextech gem into the golem, creating Blitzcrank. You can have this occur at the river where he was playing in Season 1 for a nice little callback. In the lore, Blitzcrank is a robot that Victor creates using Hextech that ends up becoming a living robot, capable of learning. They were created to help the people in Zon, and I intend to have Blitzcrank follow a similar path as in the lore, with some minor tweaks. Victor initially oversees the initial jobs he sends Blitzcrank out to do, taking note of Blitzcrank's intelligence. Later, he starts observing from afar or having the Mimic watch over Blitz, where he starts to realize Blitzcrank is learning. By the end, he's fully viewing Blitzcrank as a living individual and letting Blitz do jobs on their own without supervision. Of course, this is going to bite him in the ass, as on a job cleaning up a chemical spill in the river, Blitzcrank notices the trail of chemical runoff. Unable to clean the spill due to more chemicals getting dumped no matter what they do, Blitzcrank decides to follow the trail upstream and finds the source of the chem spill. A factory making synthetic Hextech crystals. 3 guesses as to what Blitzcrank will do next. Meanwhile, Caitlin will part ways with Vi to take her father home, though not before upsetting Vi with derogatory statements about the denizens of the Undercity. Vi will naturally be upset about this, but will remain with the other Enforcers in the squad while they wait for Kate to come back. While they wait, Vi will actually start to bond with the other Enforcers, and start coming around to seeing their perspective on things, like how maintaining order benefits society. One of the Enforcers can even encourage Vi, saying she can use her fists for good. There's an obvious layer of irony here, seeing that the Enforcers have been brutalizing the people of Zon, and while the irony will be lost on Vi, I would hope that it's not lost on the audience. On the Zonite side of the story, Jinx takes Corina to meet with Savika, and the two can discuss the ongoing oppression of Zon, and how they need to rally the Undercity together. Of course, you need a leader to do that kind of thing, and unfortunately for Savika, Jinx is the only viable candidate to do that. Corina has the drive and skill to lead Zon, but is mostly a nobody in the eyes of the Zonites. Meanwhile, Jinx is now the face of the resistance, having not only killed the Piltover Council, the leaders of the city oppressing them, but also striking the first actual blow against Piltover with her gas bomb. Unfortunately, Jinx is not at all invested in this, though Savika realizes they might have another way to unite all of Zon. For the rest of the episode, we can see Jace and Ambessa gearing up to go down into Zon, Jace to try and find Victor, and Ambessa to find the source of the Enforcers' disappearances. If you need a justification for Ambessa's case, I don't know, say a Noxian soldier got disappeared as well, so Ambessa's investigating that. I would also add that Ambessa sent out soldiers to try and look for Mel as well. Speaking of Mel though, our final scene will have Mel wake up in a mirror illusion, finding her brother there. In episode 5, we open up on Kino and Mel, with Kino revealing Ambessa's motivation of restoring Clan Medard's waning influence in Noxus, as well as the fact that Mel has magical powers, which explains why she and Jace survived the explosion. Most of Mel's scenes with Kino are kind of superfluous, but this rewrite still keeps them, mainly so we can have some setup for when the story pivots to Noxus. Back in Zon, Caitlin reunites with Vi and her squadron after getting her dad back home, and they resume their patrol. They find Echo and the Firelights fighting Enforcers, and when the Firelights escape, Kate and Vi can try and go and talk to Echo. Echo is angry that Piltover has been increasing the boot on Zon's neck, but he still shows reluctance to actually fighting back with extreme violence like what Jinx has done and what Silco endorsed. This sets up Echo's character arc in this whole rewrite, as well as his worsening relationship with Vi to showcase Vi's own development. In lore, Echo explicitly calls Vi a sellout, and while he isn't calling Vi that here, we will be building Vi's development to that point. Meanwhile, Savika, Corina, and Jinx head to Stillwater to try and break out Zonites that are being arrested by the Enforcers. In reality, Corina is looking to test her new weapons and needing a controlled environment to test them, so she has opted to use Stillwater since it's somewhat isolated from the rest of Piltover. If you actually look at the map of Piltover and Zon, you'll notice that Stillwater is actually on the Zon side. As for Jinx, she's just there to bomb stuff, and Savika is there to babysit the two. In the prison, Jinx and Savika fight the enforcers, herding them all into an isolated room. Corina then throws her new weapon into the room, a more potent version of the Zon Grey synthesized by her flowers that can penetrate through the enforcers' gas masses. The Grey wouldn't be as effective against Zonites due to them having to breathe this stuff almost every day, but against Piltovans, it's quite nasty. As Savika locks the door on the enforcers, Jinx throws a single gas mask into the room, fully aware that it will be of no help. The three then break out all the prisoners, who storm out of the prison. Meanwhile, Jace is at the bridge between Piltover and Zon, preparing to go to the Undercity when an explosion happens in view. Heading over, Jace recognizes the location as one of Camille's Hextech factories, and he spots Blitzcrank, ripping apart the factory, smashing the crystals, and beating up the workers. When enforcers arrive and try to stop Blitzcrank, Jace stops them, stating that rather than capturing the robot, they should follow it into Zon to see if they can track down who sent it. The enforcers agree, and they set off to follow Blitzcrank. Our final scene focuses on Ambessa and Rictus, down in Zon, trying to track down Warwick, who has been in the shadows hunting down people this whole time. While she doesn't find Warwick, she does find something far more valuable, Warwick's creator. Episode 6 brings us back to Mel, who figures out that Kino is actually an illusion of LeBlanc. LeBlanc reveals to Mel why the Black Rose is getting involved. Ambessa's political ambitions have been getting in the way of the Black Rose's plans, and neither the Black Rose nor Ambessa actually care about Piltover or Zon. They just happen to be a convenient resource for Ambessa to plumb. While Mel may be aware that Ambessa has been trying to extract weapons from Piltover, being aware of how flippant Ambessa is about wrecking her home for a few nicer weapons should not sit well with her, and this will allow us to have Mel break from Ambessa. Mel will break free from the Black Rose and return to Piltover. Also, unlike in the actual show, I don't intend for Mel to be imprisoned too far away from Piltover. Maybe on a nearby mountain in Valorant or something. When Mel returns to Piltover, she finds Camille, absolutely incensed by the factory that was attacked, and decides she's going to get Hextech weapons, with or without Jace's approval. At the Firelight hideout, Echo talks to Heimerdinger, who has been creating all sorts of inventions for the Zonites, both for recreation and defense. They discuss Heimerdinger's responsibilities on the council and its role in oppressing Zon. For this scene, we can further flesh out the themes of class conflict and the responsibilities of political leaders to ensure justice through Heimerdinger. He will talk to Echo about how he was ignorant to the Undercity's plight and how he intends to atone for his role in Piltover's rise at Zon's expense by giving back to the Zonite community with inventions to make their lives better. They would then start working on a new invention together. Meanwhile, Caitlin and Vi, still in Zon but closer to Stillwater's location, end up intercepting the massive prison break that Jinx, Savika, and Corina orchestrated. Kate, Vi, and the Enforcer Squad try and round up the prisoners, but are quickly overwhelmed, and to make matters worse, Warwick will show up and start wreaking even more havoc. This will be the first time Vi and Jinx see Warwick, and while Jinx will notice Warwick's similarities to Vander, Vi won't initially. Jinx, Corina, and Savika escape into chaos, and Ambessa arrives to help Caitlin and Vi with Rictus in tow, carrying a struggling human-sized bag. After rescuing Kate, Vi, and her squad, Ambessa and Rictus take them back to Piltover. Cutting away from the prison, we find Victor, having set up a makeshift hospital in an abandoned factory. Remember the stasis device he used to save the Mimic? Well, he set up an upscaled version of that to keep all his patients alive while he fixes them, with the Mimic serving as an assistant. Blitzcrank returns to the factory, accidentally leading Jace and the Enforcers there, where Jace finds not only is Victor the one who built Blitzcrank, but Victor has been machine heralding it up down in the Undercity. Jace, having set out to get Victor back, asks Victor to come back with him, apologizing for losing sight of their shared dream and promising that he'll do better, and that when they return to Piltover, they can focus on using Hextech to help everyone. Victor can even be struck by Jace's heartfelt plea, relieving him for a moment. Then he sees the Enforcers behind Jace, readying their guns, and he realizes that while Jace may be sincere in his desire to help others, Piltover will never be. Stealing his resolve, Victor turns to the Mimic and gives her a single order: kill them. A fight breaks out between Victor, Jace, the Enforcers, the mechanized Mimic, and Blitzcrank. In the fight, Jace smashes the stasis device, which explodes and destroys the whole factory, killing all of the patients. While Jace and the Enforcers leave, Blitzcrank rescues Victor and the Mimic from the rubble, and in a heartfelt decision, leaves Victor behind, pursuing their mission to help Zon independently so that Victor cannot be blamed for their actions. So yeah, Act 2 ends with probably the worst breakup possible. Anybody who knows League will recognize that I have made a few changes to Blitzcrank's lore. For starters, in lore, he destroyed a Chembaron factory, not a Piltovan one. But we've decided that the change is necessary to tie in the rewrite's focus on the class conflict between Piltover and Zon, as well as integrating him more into Victor's story. We also have a modified version of Jace and Victor's original lore, where the divide occurs when Jace destroys a factory that Victor is trying to save people in. This scene's main purpose is creating the rift between Jace and Victor that exists in League seafloor, though with a few changes. By making the point of contention be the Enforcers, we allow the rift to come not from miscommunication, but from a divide between Jace and Victor's social standing, allowing us to set up Jace's final fall from grace in the next act. Act 3, Episode 7, opens up on Jace returning to the Piltover side, accepting that Victor will never come back to him. This will be the moment that Jace finally agrees to start building Hextech weapons, completing his betrayal of the ideals he started this entire story with. Having been brought back to Piltover by Mbessa, Vi and Caitlyn recuperate, and Vi, having bonded with the Enforcers whom she witnessed get wrecked in the recent events, becomes even more convinced about the necessity of order, and finally agrees to take up the badge Caitlyn offered her in the first episode, comparing her decision to go over to the Enforcers to Vander's pact with Grayson from Season 1. She could also profess her feelings to Caitlyn here, who reciprocates. This would cement Vi as having gone over to the Piltover side, and if you wanted, you could also have the sex scene here, maybe on top of the badge if you're feeling freaky. Afterwards, Kate, Vi, and the other Enforcers start gearing up to go hunt down Warwick now that they are aware of what's causing the Enforcer disappearances. As they are doing so, Jace approaches Caitlyn, asking if she and her squad are willing to test out some prototype Hextech weapons, to which she agrees. Meanwhile, on Mbessa's warship, Rictus opens the bag, which is revealed to have Singed inside. Mbessa requests that Singed make weapons for her, offering him anything that he needs for his goal. Singed contemplates the matter before saying that he'll need to return to his lab and would like some help in gathering his things. Mbessa smiles at his agreement and sends Rictus down to go help Singed. As Mbessa returns to the council to go talk to Mel, she is approached by Camille, who wants her expertise in warfare in order to judge the merits of the weapons her scientists and Jace have cooked up. Mbessa finds the design satisfactory and asks Camille if she can make a bulk purchase of weapons for herself, to which Camille agrees. In Zaun, Jinx begins tailing Warwick, due to the similarities she noticed to Vander during the prison break, when she notices Vi, Caitlyn, and their Enforcers also tailing Warwick, with Vi being completely decked out in the Enforcer uniforms. The Enforcers confront Warwick, and while Warwick is able to maim some of the Enforcers in the squad, their Hextech weapons are able to subdue him, only for Vi to realize Warwick is Vander. In that very moment, as Vi looks at her former father figure, she steals her resolve and prepares to kill Warwick, which is when Jinx intervenes. Jinx tries to stop Vi, telling her that Warwick is Vander, though Vi denies this, stating that Vander couldn't have turned into such a monster. Jinx kills the other Enforcers in the squad while Vi kills Warwick. As Vi stands over Warwick's corpse, Jinx mocks Vi for betraying her fellow Zonites in favor of the Piltovans before escaping. As Vi and Caitlyn return to Piltover alone, Savika begins organizing the revolt against Piltover with demands to recognize the nation of Zaun, while Corina uses her flowers to create the bombs to unleash the Grey. So Vander has arguably some of the strangest character writing in Season 2, and this is the season that introduced us to Ku Klux Kiraman, and then did nothing with it. Vander is introduced as a man who put his violent past behind him and is trying to minimize the amount of suffering in the Undercity as much as he can, mainly by making deals with the Enforcers. Season 2 tries to pretend like Vander was always a pacifist, and when they bring him back as Warwick, don't even try to use his relationship with Vi as a meaningful way to explore their characters, and instead use it to elicit an emotional response from the audience. The fact that Vander was willing to deal with Enforcers in an attempt to minimize their crackdowns on the Undercity, only for Vi to join up with the Enforcers and perpetuate said crackdowns, should have been something that was explored. So, we do it here. By having Vi's decision to join be fueled by the decision to honor Vander's memory, only to then kill Vander with her own hands, we drive home Vi's fall from grace, her severing of ties with Zaun, and her enmity of Jinx, who just killed the Enforcers that Vi just spent the last 6 episodes of this rewrite bonding with. As for Warwick, if you wanted, you could have him survive here. Maybe have him revive with his regeneration. But for Vi's character arc, she's just killed her father figure, though she's going to be a lot more in denial about it compared to Jinx when she killed her father figures. Episode 8 opens up on Echo and Heimerdinger working together on a new invention, which turns out to be the Z-Drive. Even though the device is risky, Heimerdinger trusts Echo to be able to use it. Echo worries about how everything, from all the new self-defense tools to the Zonites lashing out, is only going to make the situation worse in the future, to which Heimerdinger responds by saying that if they don't do something, the situation will never get better, citing Echo as the reason for the change in his worldview. This completes Heimerdinger's character arc of not waiting for progress and focusing on the present, and also steals Echo's resolve. As he takes up the Z-Drive, he hears from the other Firelights that a revolt against Piltover is being organized, and gears up to head out. Returning to Piltover, Vi convinces herself that killing Warwick was a necessary measure, and convinces herself that her new role as an enforcer in Piltover is necessary to bring peace, ironically becoming like Vander in some way, prioritizing peace. Meanwhile, Mel confronts Mbessa about meddling in the affairs of the two cities, to which Mbessa responds that she will no longer do so. She has already gotten the Hextech weaponry purchased from Camille as well as Singed, and she intends to leave the city, leaving the entire mess of Piltover and Zaun in Mel's hands. As she steps onto her warships, Mbessa offers Mel to come with her and return into the folds of the Medarda clan, to which Mel refuses, stating that Piltover is her home. Mbessa bids Mel farewell, stating that she is proud of what Mel has built for herself before leaving, while Mel feels betrayed by her mother. This scene effectively concludes includes Mbessa's involvement in the story, and while she's a lot less in the thick of it compared to actual Season 2, her involvement has a lot more ramifications narratively and thematically. Her manipulations are a lot more subtle due to being able to bounce off of Camille, and like most Imperial powers in the real world, she gets everything she ever wants and gets away with it scot-free while leaving everything worse for the cities that she exploited. Plus, because she's still alive, we can actually continue her story if we wanted to, unlike in the actual show where she gets killed off almost immediately after being introduced as a champion in League of Legends. We then cut to Camille observing Jace as he arms the Enforcers with Hextech weaponry, giving her approval while Jace prepares himself to fight as well. In Zaun, Jinx shows up to where Savika is organizing the Zaunites as she prepares to kickstart the revolt. The Zaunites begin marching to the bridge when the Firelights meet them, only to lower their weapons and offer to join up. You could even add a meaningful interaction between Jinx and Echo here if you wanted to. Presenting a united front, Zaun prepares to confront the Enforcers of Piltover. The original episode 8 in Arcane was very much a calm before the storm type of episode, and the rewrite follows a similar path, focusing on all the characters as they prepare for the final conflict. However, instead of doing what the actual show did, where the conflict was between Piltover and Noxus with Zaun joining up to fight for their oppressors, we instead have the conflict be between Piltover and Zaun, on the very same bridge where we started this whole entire series. By doing this, we keep the whole story more focused. Plus, by ending on the bridge, we can even play into the original episode's mantra of how killing is a cycle. Only this time, we never insinuate that the victim has a responsibility to break the cycle, instead of the side that perpetuates the cycle in the first place. So episode 9 begins not with the fighting, but with Echo sneaking over to Piltover's side to talk to Vi. He asks her to try and find some way to call off the Enforcers, but Vi refuses. The two get into a fight as Echo tries to convince her, using his Z-Drive over and over, but Vi doesn't budge. Once Echo realizes that Vi has fully gone over to Piltover's side, he gives up and leaves, only saying one thing to Vi: "I remember when you stood for something important." Fighting ensues on the bridge with Savika, Echo, and Victor, maybe, leading the Zaunites against Caitlyn, Vi, and Jace, who are leading the Enforcers. From one of Piltover's towers, Camille watches the battle from a window, completely expressionless, while Mel sits at a nearby table, completely somber. The battle slowly starts to turn in the Enforcers' favor, given how they have Hextech weapons, when an explosion happens in the Enforcer lines. Looking up, they spot Jinx standing on one of the bridge's towers, firing rockets from fishbones onto the Enforcers. Vi scales the tower and confronts Jinx, who merely laughs and calls her a traitor. The two fight each other as the Zaunites fight the Enforcers until the tables turn when Corina detonates her explosives, releasing her enhanced version of the Grey on everybody on the bridge. The Enforcers immediately start choking as their masses don't filter it out, and the Zaunites gain the upper hand. At the top of the tower, the gas gets to both Jinx and Vi, with Vi starting to choke on the gas. Jinx mocks Vi for being unable to resist the Grey, saying she spent too much time in the sun and forgotten where she came from, before kicking her off the tower back onto the bridge. Jinx then fires one last rocket at the bridge, striking at just the right point to cause the entire thing to collapse, severing the connection between the two cities for good. As the bridge collapses, the Enforcers retreat back to Piltover while the Zaunites fall back. Vi, on Piltover's side of the river, watches as Jinx disappears into the crowd of Zaunites while Savika raises the flag of Zaun. Back in the tower, Mel expresses that she still wants to reconcile the two cities, to which Camille responds that Piltover will always be above Zaun. As Camille leaves the room, Mel vows to build the Medarda clan up in Piltover and to never stop fighting for the two cities. In Piltover, Caitlyn starts to try and look into the person who kidnapped her father, believing that they are the one responsible for weaponizing the Grey against Piltover, with Vi by her side. The two of them talk about whether all of their actions were right or not. As they discuss this, we would showcase Zaun in ruins from all the brutality the Enforcers enacted in all the previous episodes, and the Zaunites rebuilding on their own. Victor and the Mimic would be working on healing people injured in the fight, Blitzcrank would be rebuilding destroyed houses, Jinx would be in her hideout building more bombs to terrorize Piltover, and Savika and Corina would be heading another meeting, planning their next move in building up Zaun. In a post-credits scene, in the waters between Valoran and Ionia, on board Mbessa's warships, Singed revives Oriana. I guess in this version, Singed also wins in the end. To summarize, Pearl and I did this because we felt it was important for a story to stick to the themes it promised at the start, or at least make a meaningful effort to do so. Sure, stories can be read in various ways, with various interpretations, but part of the job of being a writer is to narrow in that focus to get the audience thinking about what the story is trying to say, while trying to avoid contradicting itself and steering away from being too prescriptive. We get it. Being mindful that your story is what you intended to be is one of the hardest parts of being a writer. There are posters on social media that have already said this better than I ever could about why the oppressor apologia of Arcane Season 2 is tone-deaf and even harmful, whether it was intentional or not. I think as a creative, it's completely fine to make a story that doesn't intend to focus on any events with political commentary, but oftentimes, art is not apolitical, if it ever is at all. And Arcane Season 1 firmly entrenched itself with its repeated scenes and character interactions about how and what class conflict between two cities look like, with all of its complexities and nuances, and how it affects the lives of the people that live in it, the characters we all came to care about so much. much. In my opinion, there is as much importance to the writer's intentions as there is to being mindful of the effect of that intention, to build up the foresight to see if maybe your story is about what you intended it to be about, which again is part of what makes writing so difficult. If you came to Arcane Season 1 for fun characters, you got that, plus consistent characterization and a bonus of something meaningful to think about. You would have walked away from the story having a better understanding of how these two cities are in constant conflict, with how Piltover keeps causing societal problems for Zaun, driving Zaun to the point of breaking away as a nation of its own. Ideally, in Season 2, these ideas should have been researched more thoroughly, possibly by speaking with people and communities in real life to get a better idea of how to represent such a class conflict before putting the words on the page. Instead, everyone in Season 2 got character assassinated, and the writers remaining on the project expressed wanting to steer away from any political themes, which is what likely contributed to the wonky pacing and thematic betrayals that we got. At the end of the day, with a bit more chewing on the ideas of class conflict and a realization that the constraints of the lore give the opportunity to innovate and expand creativity rather than stifle it, we might have gotten a more thoughtful Season 2. But as it stands, we got what we got. I can only dread how they are going to handle the storylines of Noxus, Ionia, and Demacia in the future, because Noxus is pure imperialism, Ionia is a nation fighting against colonialism, and Demacia is committing genocide. So, there you have it. Thanks for watching. Please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe for future videos, and I'll see you next time.